Mel O'Brien, Inclusive Agile, Real-World Accessibility.
Hi everyone, today I wanted to start by addressing the elephant in the room. Yes, it's true, Coles did get sued. My name's Mel and I'm the Senior Digital Accessibility Analyst at Coles. Now I've listened to many accessibility speeches which have talked about the warning stories and the cautionary tales about what happens when companies don't care about accessibility. And the cautionary tale that gets used again and again is about Coles. For those of you who don't know, back in 2014, Coles was taken to court because the online shopping website wasn't accessible. And shopping for your groceries online is undeniably a basic need. That was then. So I want to talk now about what happened after the headlines. Well, today we have a strategic focus on accessibility, and our goal is digital equality. And our intention is to ensure that digital experiences are inclusive for everyone. We learnt from our mistakes. Hopefully you can too. Now, don't get me wrong. What happened to Coles should continue to serve as a warning case to others. But beyond being a cautionary tale, Coles also serves as an example of an organisation that is making a deliberate cultural shift to place more of an emphasis on accessibility. Nevertheless, we're still a cautionary tale, so much so that recently a friend of mine who works for a different organisation read a report, and in the report there was a headline which said, "Why accessibility is important." And what do you think was below that heading? Yep, that's right, an entire paragraph about how Coles got sued. Now, personally, I thought they could have gone to a bit more trouble and talked about things like digital inequality, increased customer base, and inclusive design. But nope, they just decided to go with, you don't want to end up like Coles. So shopping for groceries online is actually just one of the hundreds of digital assets that we are responsible for at Coles. And all of the other digital assets used by customers and our team members also need our care and attention. Today I'll talk to you about our approach to delivering accessible digital solutions. Now, companies like to use Agile to address speed, risk, and flexibility when going to market. But how does accessibility fit in? Now, generally speaking, and it does make me sad to say, but accessibility has a bit of an image problem. It is seen as a blocker and a hurdle that slows down projects. But accessibility and Agile can be a perfect marriage. However, many organisations struggle with delivering accessible experiences. And when trying to bring their products and services up to meet accessibility standards, what usually happens is organisations will go through a WCAG audit, either just before or just after launch. When this happens, the project manager or product owner is faced with the challenges of finding the budget for the audit remediation and finding the time to do all of this work before the project goes live, or even worse, before someone notices that it's not accessible. When companies are trying to get an accessibility certificate of compliance for their website, what it reminds me of is when you're trying to get a roadworthy certificate for your car. You go in to get your car assessed, and then the mechanic gives you this long list of things that you need to fix. You immediately feel overwhelmed and worried about how much it's going to cost and how long it's going to take. And all you want to do is get driving. Sadly, a lot of times, the driver just ends up driving off, crossing their fingers and hoping for the best, but knowing full well in their heart of hearts that it's an accident waiting to happen. This is why we're now using an inclusive agile model at Coles. So in terms of accessibility maturity at Coles, we've got an accessibility team, we've got an accessibility steering committee, we've got an accessibility policy, we've got procedures and training and the support of our senior leaders. And accessibility champions in all areas of the business. And every day, we're doing everything we can to make things more accessible to everyone. The reason we do this is because we get how important it is. Sure, Coles is a business, but it's a business made up of people. People like me and my team who like to innovate, to brainstorm, to discuss and have conversations about how to make our products and services more accessible. So in terms of accessibility maturity, we're doing really well, but that doesn't mean we instantly ascend into accessibility nirvana, unfortunately. So working through how we plan to deliver on this goal, we realised that the traditional audit model wasn't working for us, at least not on this scale, with this number of assets and the diversity of those assets. We're talking e-commerce sites, internal sites, comms platforms, kiosks, inventory solutions, software programs, assisted checkouts, and that's just to name a few. So the traditional model, or as I like to call it, the accessibility after we've done everything else, if we get enough time and if it doesn't blow out the budget or timelines approach, follows the usual agile discover, design, build, test, and then launch, or just before launch, this is the time that accessibility audit is usually conducted and all the defects are found. Then the developer works through the fixes and defects, and with any luck, they get fixed and eventually an accessible product is delivered. This is slow, this is expensive, and this is hella risky. The accessibility part of the process still basically reverts to waterfall. Now, formal policies and processes are great, but unfortunately, when they're only known to a small group of people and not practiced, well, they're about as useful as a random file that someone uploaded to SharePoint that no one knows where it is. The real dream is to implement a way of working where everyone plays their part. And this is why we're rolling out an inclusive agile approach. Now, people have been theorising about including accessibility in agile for a while, and theoretically, it definitely works. But what I wanted to know was, will it work in the real world, on a large scale, here in Australia, and for selfish reasons, I wanted to know if it would work for us at Coles. Because Coles teams mostly work in Agile already, it just makes sense to embed accessibility into the way we're already working. Okay, so then we turn to the people. Now, historically, people don't love change. And people don't like you coming in and adding extra things into their already lengthy to-do lists. And as I already mentioned, accessibility has a bit of an image problem and is seen as a hurdle. And if something is seen as a blocker or a nice to have, then it will be deprioritised until the end of time. So I like to think of it as eating your vegetables. don't make people eat a whole bowl of kale. On this slide, I've shown a bowl of kale. Well, it's actually a meme that reads, pro tip, if you stir coconut oil into your kale, it makes it easy to scrape into the bin. But if we're all playing our part and contributing towards delivering accessible solutions, then a bite-sized piece of kale is okay. And people's attitudes shift from, ugh, don't make me eat kale, to wait, what, I'm eating kale? On this slide, I've shown a delicious melty cheese toastie that just so happens to have tiny pieces of kale in it. So why are Agile and accessibility such a good match? Well, firstly, the business needs to deliver high-quality, accessible solutions. And by picking up the defects early and often, remediation time is reduced, thereby helping to ensure projects are delivered on time. So we did a lot of research and we spoke to the team members at Coles to find out if Inclusive Agile would work for them, if it would work for us, because it's a theory at this point, right? Then we took the traditional model and embedded all the accessibility actions, tasks, checkpoints into the Agile process. And to demonstrate, I'll talk you through the model using an example from the Coles app. So as usual, you start with the business need, and in this case, they were improving the app, the search function on the app, to make it easier for customers to find products in stores. So at discover and define stage, we're involved. And accessibility is included in the business requirements document. And the accessibility analyst, in this case me, was involved in solving the business need to ensure that accessibility considerations were taken into account. Next, we move on to the design phase, and during the design phase, the UX designer created the designs, leveraging the design system, and making sure the designs shown at showcases to the key stakeholders were inclusive and passed accessibility standards. Then the BA evolved the business requirements around those inclusive designs, wrote user stories, design specs, and included accessibility in the definition of done. Then we move on to build, and the developers built the solution based on the business requirements and those inclusive designs, also leveraging the design system. Then the testers tested the solution using accessibility-focused test cases, which were informed by the business requirements. For example, a test case for Android started with open app, turn on talkback. So at this point, usually, if it was a bigger project, then we would do an accessibility review or an accessibility audit and include people with disabilities in user testing. Though it's important to note that the audit impact would be significantly less than if we had have taken the traditional audit approach. The final phases are launch, and then we wrap up the sprint or project, and the iteration process continues, fluidly fitting in with Agile. So no more of this one-off set and forget, roadworthy certificate, drive away, tick, we're done scenario. Now we have regular services, we check our oil and water, we pump up our tyres, and the car is maintained and kept in excellent working order. So back to the dream. We had the foundations and the model made sense. But what was missing? So last year, I'll just tell a little story. Last year, I was working on a project and I was working through the planning with the tester, the lead tester. And as we were working through when we were going to fit in the alley testing and the QA testing, she was telling me about how at a previous role, her test lead had made everyone in the team write a research report about accessibility. I was like, oh my God, wow, that's amazing. And I asked, and I thought to myself, well, maybe she could include accessibility testing in her QA testing at the same time. But after I got talking to her, it became pretty clear that that wasn't going to happen. She was like, no. And it was, the takeaway for me was she was freaked out by the idea because she was worried that she'd missed something. She didn't feel like she had enough time. She was worried her productivity would go down if she did start doing accessibility testing, and then she would get in trouble with her boss. She didn't have the confidence to do the accessibility work and wanted/needed an expert, aka a person with accessibility in their job title, which is fair enough. So what we realised, what was missing was the know-how. How would we support and guide people through this very familiar yet slightly more kale-flavoured journey? So I spoke with our learning and development team to get their advice. And the one thing that stood out in my head that I just couldn't get out of my head, they told me that after one day, people forget 70% of what they learn in training. I'll let you just have a think about that for a sec. It is a scary statistic, and I do challenge it when you couple it with on-the-job experience. So we wondered if a one-on-one coaching style training model would provide the information and the hands-on experience required to ingrain the necessary accessibility skills and knowledge. And crucially, to give the participants the confidence to use that knowledge. So we selected a team to start who were excited to learn and already had an interest in accessibility to pilot the new way of working. And we enlisted help from our friends at Intopia to create and to deliver the training. And it was an excellent method for providing the understanding and the skills that we needed. On this slide, I've got a picture of the group training with Intopia and our participants from Coles, and then a picture of me with one of the developers and the BA, smiling. Okay, but nevertheless, I still had that 70% knowledge lost after a day statistic ringing in my head. We didn't need everybody to simply learn about accessibility. We needed them to do it. We needed them to actively contribute. So to measure this metric, we collected before and after data to establish their accessibility confidence and competency, and then reviewed their changes in their behaviours and actions before and after. We checked in and we checked up. Now we have over 200 digital assets and counting that we're responsible for, and we have an accessibility team of 3. You do the maths. More people actively contributing to accessibility means less risk for the business. It means our small yet plucky alley team will be able to cover more ground. Is this method a panacea? No. We have hundreds of digital assets in the Coles ecosystem, so it's a long game. The initial feedback following the pilot shows this new way of working is in fact working in terms of sharing the responsibilities, increasing checkpoints, and reducing the amount of alley defects. To me, this means more accessible experiences for everyone. In summary, use what you already have. And in this case, we had Agile. Meet people where they are. We used Agile phases and inputted the accessibility actions and checkpoints to make sure accessibility was included throughout. You also need to help people to include accessibility by offering expert guidance and support, either internal or external. You need to teach people the things they need to know to give them the confidence to do it. By delivering accessibility training and support, what this actually does is make it so simple that you can't skip it. We're doing it, so can you. Thank you.